American official confirms that yet another unidentified object has been shot down by the US military earlier today, this time over Lake Huron in Michigan. The Pentagon saying it's likely, but have not yet confirmed, that this latest object is the same one they tried to shoot down yesterday after they picked it up on radar over Montana. Michigan Congressman Jack Bergman told Fox News earlier the object had an octagonal structure and was flying at an altitude of about 20,000 feet. So now we have 4 of these objects shot down in the last 8 days. And all we got from the Pentagon in a briefing just moments ago is that the military is not currently monitoring any other suspicious objects in US territory. Well, that's reassuring. Evening, everyone. Welcome to The Next Revolution. So we obviously don't know very much about all this. And that itself is a problem, frankly. It speaks to the totally chaotic way this has been handled by Biden and the White House. Just days ago, Biden was telling us that the giant China spy balloon merrily wandering around over our nuclear bases, sucking up sensitive secrets, was no big deal. Not a major breach, he said. But now, all these other smaller flying objects are such a major breach, they have to be shot down on sight. The administration's explanations for what they're doing and why are all over the place, like the Chinese spy balloons, it seems. First, they say it's not a threat. Then they say it is a threat, but they've protected our military bases, so it's okay. Then they say they wanted to shoot it down, but couldn't because they were worried about hitting something on the ground, even though they spotted the first spy balloon in exactly the same kind of place as they've now shot down 3 more in the last 2 days. It's a total joke. And there are still massive questions they're refusing to answer. Are these things hostile attacks from China or not? I can understand they may not have picked up today's debris yet, but it's been 2 days since they shot down the one over Alaska. If it takes 2 days for our military to find something they shot down in our own country, we've got even bigger problems than we thought. Why do they hide this from the public until a local newspaper in Billings, Montana, reported it? And why wasn't our military properly prepared for this new threat? The Defense Department's budget is over $800 billion a year, and they keep demanding more. Who's in charge over there? Certainly not the useless Defense Secretary, former Raytheon arms dealer, Lloyd Austin, it seems. If this is an attack by China, why hasn't Biden spoken to the American people about it? And if it isn't, why hasn't Biden spoken to us about that, to stop any inflammatory speculation? They can't just say, we don't know what these things are. If they don't know what they are, why are they shooting them down? Isn't that a little too trigger-happy for comfort? So what all this tells us about Biden and his administration is that they are erratic, indecisive, and weak. Not exactly encouraging. Joining us now for analysis, former House Intel Chair and former Michigan Congressman Mike Rogers. Mike, thanks for joining us. I mean, what do you make of this? It just seems like a shambles to me.
Well, clearly our adversaries are probing, and so they sense a weakness in the Biden administration, and they are ramping this up. And candidly, people would say, well, why are you sending something you know may get shot down or has a high likelihood of getting shot down? Well, really, the reason is there's valuable intelligence to see how we react and to see all the signals that go on with notifying our pilots what it is and how to do it and all of those kinds of things. Certainly there's value in that for them, but also it's to show that there is no apprehension for them to do what they're doing now. And that's because, again, they detect a weakness in the Biden administration. We've never seen anything quite like this at this level, this scale, this tempo. There's a reason for that.
But Mike, are you assuming that these, the last 3 that they've shot down in the last 2 days are Chinese spy, whatever, flying objects?
No, I'm not. I would be interested to see more information on both what was described as cylindrical and octagonal. Listen, the Russians also would have an interest, and by the way, would cooperate with the Chinese Communist Party in this, given where their actions in Ukraine. So I am not convinced they're all Chinese, but I am going to guess certainly the balloons were Chinese. And then these new objects, it would be interesting to see. I think I'd need more data to discern that, and I'm sure that our folks are trying to discern that as well.
But I mean, this is the point. I mean, it's been days now, and they're sort of, briefing that they're shooting all this stuff down. Here's another one we've got, but absolutely nothing. One way or the other. either to say, don't worry, these are just sort of random things, nothing to do with any military threat. It's just we're you know, abundance of caution, whatever, you know, bureaucratic language they use about threats to civilian aircraft or whatever, but nothing, no information whatsoever. So that's just days and days where people speculate. There's so much. This morning, the Sunday shows was just a complete joke of people speculating. Why aren't they saying anything about any of this? They must know more than they're letting on. As I said, they've had 2 days to get the one from Alaska.
Well, I hope they know more than they're letting on, Steve. But I will tell you, when you fly something at 20,000 feet, that's provocative. And I'll tell you why. Because we have commercial airliners all through that spectrum of airspace. And that starts to become really dangerous. This is not a high altitude, 60,000 foot. And this, again, is according to the information that the government is giving us. That 20,000, that's provocative. They know that you're going to see it. They know that they're going to be intercepted at some point. And by the way, the intelligence they get, they're calculating, is worth whatever provocation value they get, number one. And number two, whatever short-term intelligence they get on signals intelligence and other things about how the U.S. reacts, including missiles, radar signals, and all of the sort, including the kind of signals that are coming off an aircraft, an F-22, when they engage in that, all of those signals, that's valuable intelligence for them. So they're making the calculation that they know they're going to get intercepted. They're flying at 20,000 feet, which they know will jeopardize U.S. civilian aircraft or Canadian aircraft. My argument is, hey, we better stand back and understand exactly what message they're sending. This is bigger than us intercepting these spycraft in our airspace. They're trying to tell us something, and we need to understand what that is, and we need to be very resolute in our strength and showing that we're not going to tolerate this.
Yeah, and what I'd like to understand, a lot of people, I think, is why this is suddenly almost literally coming on the radar with all the billions and billions and billions of dollars that they have. That this is suddenly a surprise, and now they're running around sort of trying to catch up by shooting everything down. Mike Rogers, we're out of time, but we really appreciate you joining us at short notice tonight. Of course, if there's anything else shot down in the next 53 minutes, we'll bring that to you. Now let's move on to the State of the Union this week, or more precisely, the state of Biden, because as he might say, folks, it's not good. Of course, there were the lies, laughably obvious ones.
As we made clear last week, if China threatens our sovereignty, we will act to protect our country, and we did.
No, you didn't. You waited till after China breached our sovereignty, and they called Trump a liar. After the State of the Union, but before this new policy of shooting down practically everything in the sky, Biden said this.
The idea that a balloon could traverse, break American airspace is, anyway, it's not a major breach.
No, not a major breach. It's more like...
It's a minor incursion.
A minor incursion. After he heard that last year, Putin invaded Ukraine. What message do you think she will take from this latest fiasco? And what about this?
Here at home, inflation is coming down. Inflation has fallen every month for the last 6 months.
Biden didn't bring down inflation. Look at this chart. He pushed it up with his insane spending. And it's not coming down because of anything he did, but because the Fed jacked up interest rates, which still could tip us into recession. Biden's other big economic claim is also another total joke.
Jobs are coming back. Pride is coming back because choices we made in the last several years. We've created, with the help of many people in this room, 12 million new jobs, more jobs created in 2 years than any president's created in 4 years.
The jobs are coming back despite his policies. First of all, the number of jobs created is actually a bounce back from the millions destroyed by the totally unjustified anti-science lockdowns that he supported and pushed. But even with that inevitable bounce back, we're still at a lower level than before, much lower. The labor participation rate, the proportion of working-age Americans actually working, is, outside the height of the pandemic shutdown, the lowest in nearly 50 years. If it was even close to the highest we've seen, over 10 million more Americans would be working today, but they're not. No wonder half of Americans say they're worse off than they were a year ago. That is the most since, surprise, surprise, the last time Biden was in office, during the Great Recession. Now, a lot of people did say after the State of the Union, wow, Biden was pretty feisty, high energy even. Not the usual mumbling, stumbling, half-dead husk. Oh, but you just had to wait till the day after. Once he was off whatever, normal Biden, see there, just totally senile and out of it. Better than the somewhat disturbing, pumped-up, angry Biden that just randomly pops out of nowhere. We've seen that before.
Think about what you'd think about. How quickly we forget. Fewer. Not more, fewer. Well, I'm sick and tired of smart guys.
Yeah, we noticed. And on Tuesday night, Mr. Weird Angry Guy was back every now and again.
Name me a world leader who changed places with Xi Jinping. Name me one. Name me one.
Okay, take it easy, Grandpa. Everything's going to be fine. But despite the lunatic outbursts and the lies and the left-wing agenda that Biden pushed throughout his speech, it seems that Democrats and the media have drawn exactly the wrong lesson from the State of the Union. They looked at the state of Biden and said, yeah, he did well enough to run in 2024. For Democrats, that is actually the problem. Tell us what you think about the State of the Union or the state of Biden on the new free Twitter at NextRevFNC and at Steve Hilton X, and share this message when we post it. Our friend Tammy Bruce is here with reaction. Tammy, what do you make of the State of the Union and the state of Biden in the aftermath of it all?
Well, you know, I'll tell you, obviously, with what's been happening in the last week since the State of the Union, but, you know, after the large Chinese balloon, even the Martians are concerned about Joe Biden. I mean, they're sending, I don't know, maybe Mars needs cats or dads or dogs. I don't know what Mars needs right now. But it's been quite surreal. The entire experience since this election in 2020 and what's happened since, it's been bizarre. And one of the reasons why I think many people are feeling disturbed is because we aren't getting information. And that's what you mentioned, of course, your opening and the earlier interview was, I think, right on target, is that we heard a State of the Union that was gibberish. And you normally watch the State of the Union because you're supposed to hear about the State of the Union. You're not supposed to be hearing about a wish fantasy, social justice fantasy campaign speech that is not rooted at all in our day-to-day reality. So it makes Americans concerned about who's in charge, what else we're being lied to about. He mentions, oh, China and our sovereignty. Doesn't mention that what occurred. Right? I mean, this is now, that was bad enough that we let it traverse the entire country. But now we have several more that, you know, we can presume it's from China because we know a similar effort was made with the balloon. But the Canadian defense minister at a press conference yesterday said that the object was cylindrical. And there were some earlier reports that they didn't know what to think because there was no obvious propulsion, which means it wasn't attached to a balloon. But you see now, so we're taking bits and pieces from media, and no one in the American government is stepping up to say, and I said this on Twitter an hour ago or so, if people were irritated by Donald Trump's vocabulary and him being transparent and talking about everything, well, he right now would be telling us what was going on. But this wouldn't have happened in a Trump presidency because Afghanistan would not have been the catastrophe that it was, and our enemies would be too afraid to be this daring.
Exactly. And you know, we'll be looking at this soon in the context of Ukraine. We're coming up to the one-year anniversary. That wouldn't have happened. So there's so many consequences from that. Just one thing I'll say, Tammy, some people might have listened to it and said, well, she's a bit harsh, you know, saying that, you know, it's this fantasy that he was painting, a bit political there. No, the data back you up. I mean, look at the numbers. 70% of the country thinks we're going in the wrong direction. The numbers for his economic disapproval are incredibly high. People feeling worse off in greater numbers than at any time since the Great Recession. So what I found interesting, is this contrast between the pundits and the elite who sort of thought that because he had some, you know, kind of feisty performance, it was a great State of the Union, everything's great. But that's not, it's really disconnected from the real world.
Yeah, and that's our issue, is that when asked also in polls, Americans would choose their own words to describe their feelings about the present and the future. And the word disaster is the one that comes up most often. So we're living our lives. We have the daily experiences of inflation and of insecurity.
That is what people say. Yeah.
Yes, and of wars. And then he thinks because he's telling us he's worried about resort fees and the crazy vacation fees that we all do hate. And at the same time, we know that the IRS is talking about now about a rule to take your tips, to tax your tips. So, this is a remarkable time where we hear one thing and experience another that's quite the opposite.
Oh, I know. All right, Tammy, we will see you later in the show. Thank you so much. Now, look, however much we can mock Biden, and we should, however much we focus on his lies, and we should. The fact is that the message of the first part of his State of the Union was an attempt to give a strong blue-collar pitch to offer a positive and practical menu of help to working families. Biden talked about the middle class, manufacturing jobs, buy American, the forgotten men and women. Look, it's no use just complaining that he's trying to steal Trump's message, which he is, and it's no use complaining that Biden's actual policies, unlike Trump's, are more socialist than populist, which they are. The GOP would be making a huge mistake to just dismiss all this. If Republicans want to actually win elections, if they're serious about being the pro-worker party, they need to up their game on pro-worker policy and telling a pro-worker story. Here to discuss is the Executive Director of American Compass, Oren Cass. Oren, your thoughts on what the GOP needs to do in response to that pitch, however flawed the substance. It was a strong pitch from Biden.
Well, I think, as you said, Biden is using a lot of the right words, especially at the beginning of that speech. And the problem for the Republican Party right now is it's not at all clear what they stand for. And I think we've seen that in the McCarthy speakership fight. We've seen that in there not being a presidential agenda to run on, not an agenda to run on in the midterms. And there's so much that they could be talking about. I think they have a very strong story on issues like trade and immigration, which are incredibly important to workers. The Biden administration's policy on immigration at the southern border is a disaster for American workers, but obviously that's not something the Democrats are going to do anything about. Republicans have to be talking in terms of what that means for wages for Americans. I think education is another hugely important one. You have the Biden administration spending probably close to $500 billion forgiving student debt for college students and then turning right around and trying to shovel more money into colleges. Republicans have to have a message of saying, if those are the kinds of things you're talking about, that just proves how completely broken our higher education system is. We need to be building something else and investing much more in non-college pathways, which is the way that most people are going to make it successfully into the workforce.
In skills training and vocational education, exactly. We've talked about that before. Apart from that, what are some of the specific policy areas or even policy recommendations that you would have for the GOP in the next 2 years?
Well, so I think, immigration, very important. Those skills training, things that aren't college, incredibly important. I think another one that's a huge opportunity just sitting out there is to talk about labor. Organized labor, the way we do it in this country, dominated by big labor, is a disaster. And we see that even with all of the noise over the past year or two, the share of Americans who are a part of a union keeps going down. And we've done surveys that show Americans, they don't want to be part of unions as they are today, which are these political enterprises doing progressive social justice stuff as much as they're actually doing anything for workers. And I think there's a huge chance for Republicans to say, look, we want workers to have representation. We want them to have power and be able to speak up for themselves. That can't look anything like what big labor looks like today. So let's not just cheer it dying out. Let's actually talk about how it could work well and actually give workers a real voice in the workplace.
I think it's incredibly important. I think what you're doing at American Compass is incredibly important. They should pay attention to it. Everyone saw Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders announce she's rolling out sweeping education reform for her state. And the next day, she laid out the details.
Our new Education Freedom Account allows parents to enroll their kids in whatever school is most appropriate for their family, whether it be public, private, parochial, or homeschool. We will never subject our kids to indoctrination, and we will never, ever expose our young children to inappropriate material. Most importantly, This legislation ensures that every Arkansas student graduates with the education and training they need to succeed in life. For students who are not meeting the reading benchmarks in K through 3, we will provide $500 tutoring grants. The new Career Ready Diploma will provide high school students with the opportunity to choose a pathway that best fits their needs after graduation.
There's also 120 literacy coaches across the state, a pay increase for teachers, raising their starting salary to $50,000, along with incentives and bonuses for improved teacher performance. Joining us now with reaction is Gloria Romero, who's the co-founder of Explore Academy Charter School in California and was previously the Democratic leader of the California State Senate. Gloria, great to see you, as always. What did you make of this plan?
Well, I would say that the smartest thing for any governor in America to do right now is to enact and to pass a school choice initiative. It makes sense in terms of politics as well as just education policy.
It's interesting because we had Kim Reynolds on the other week. She's got this. She signed a bill in Iowa, just as you're describing. You have Sarah Sanders now pushing it forward in Arkansas. And both of them, I think I'm correct in saying, that a big part of the whole package is a pay increase for teachers. So I think it's interesting the way that they're putting it together. I think they're trying to signal that we support teachers. This is not anti-teacher. This is anti-teacher union, perhaps, but we're not anti-teacher.
Absolutely. And I think that's where parents really can step forward to say, this is about ultimately putting kids first, really making parents become the architects of their children's futures. This is not anti-teacher. In fact, I believe that many teachers, when they're exposed to what the school choice initiatives really strive to achieve, they are for this because nobody wants to see kids failing in schools. And over, here in California, where I am, we find that, for example, during Black History Month, 70% of African American kids are not even at standard when it comes to reading. 80% are not proficient in mathematics. So anybody in the education profession should be willing to try a new option, and these are certainly these initiatives.
That's so interesting, the teacher attitude, because presumably also the benefit of the freedom you get as part of, through the school choice process, is freedom for teachers to teach the way they want and to have less of that kind of public school bureaucracy that comes from a centralized system.
Right. And we do find that there is a break between the rank and file teachers from the executive boards of the teachers' unions, the talking heads. Teachers, rank and file teachers, they want to do their job. They are professionals. They want to be treated as such. They want to have choice themselves in the development of their curriculum and in the teaching of their classrooms. And so more and more as these programs get rolled out, and I think the inevitability of school choice happening in America, I think teachers will be on board. The teachers union talking heads won't like it, but even somebody like Randy Weingarten should not be afraid of having schools succeed, because when schools succeed, it shows that the rank and file teachers are succeeding, and that's what we should all want.
Exactly. Very beautifully put, Gloria. The new charter school sounds exciting. Perhaps we can talk about that another time. Great to see you, and we'll see you later on in the show. So last week, we told you how I was censored on Instagram for telling the truth on my new podcast, The Steve Hilton Show, about the Biden gas stoves ban. Pathetically, Instagram tried to dodge accountability for their partisan censorship by blaming their fact-checking partner, USA Today, and told us to appeal to them, which we did. Outrageously, USA Today completely ignored us until we talked about it on this show last Sunday and appealed directly to its editor-in-chief, Nicole Carroll. Miraculously, the very next day, we did get a response from their fact-check editor, Eric Litke. Thanks for reaching out. We are going to deny your appeal for the following reasons. Mr. Hilton's video was posted to Instagram on January the 17th, stating in part, the Biden administration wants to ban your gas stoves. As our fact-check noted, there were on-the-record statements at that point from both the Biden White House and the relevant federal agency directly contradicting this assertion. Proposed or enacted bans of gas stoves or natural gas by local governments do not support the Post's claim that the Biden administration wants to ban gas stoves. Oh, so there were on-the-record statements from the Biden White House contradicting it. So that's the fact check? There are on-the-record statements from Republican leaders contradicting Biden's claim that the GOP wants to cut Medicare and Social Security. But Instagram isn't censoring that. Biden and the climate zealots who control his policies do want to ban gas stoves. You can see, by the way, there is Biden talking about the cutting Medicare and Social Security on Instagram. It's clear they want to ban gas stoves. From all the evidence we laid out last week, Instagram and USA Today are just reciting Biden administration talking points. That's not a fact check, it's propaganda. Instagram and USA Today are trying to silence one side of a perfectly legitimate political debate that is anti-democratic and completely unacceptable. We're not giving up on this, and neither should you. Go to stopigcensorship.com and tell Mark Zuckerberg what you think. I know some of you had problems last week, but that's because there were just too many people trying to sign the petition at once. We've done our best to fix that, so please do try again and tell Zuckerberg we won't be silenced over the gas stove ban or anything else. America's economic history. Instead of America's prosperity being built on free trade, as globalists claim, it turns out the foundation of our economic success was protectionist, pro-America trade barriers put in place by our founders. I've been wanting to talk to the author of that piece for ages, and now he's finally here. President and CEO of the Intercollegiate Studies Institute, Johnny Burtka. Johnny, great to see you. I just want to point out, by the way, your piece was on American Compass. We had Oren Cass on earlier. Just another reason why people should check out American Compass. But John, tell us about your argument here. For those who haven't read the piece, lay it out for us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Steve. First and foremost, I think that it's important that we identify the fundamental goals of American political economy. There are three of them. First, we need to make things in America. George Washington knew this better than anyone else in his first address to Congress, where he said that in economic matters, we needed to be independent for essential, particularly military supplies. I think this is more true today than ever before with the threat that we face from the People's Republic of China and the Chinese Communist Party. Number two, we need to innovate here in America. There's a myth that we can offshore whole industries on the other side of the world and keep the innovation here, when really innovation happens where things are being made. And number three, we need to create broad-based prosperity and economic growth that can be shared with America's middle and working classes. We cannot allow this country to become an oligarchy, and we are dangerously close. But if we return to the American system of Alexander Hamilton, Henry Clay, and Abraham Lincoln, we can develop a system that can truly make America the great manufacturing power and the great independent middle class that made us so successful.
So what did they specifically do that would be described today as protectionist?
Sure. Well, you have to understand at the time the United States was caught within the British colonial system. We produced raw materials. We sent it back to the mother country. They added value to it and then sold it back to us as a profit. The founding fathers created not only our political independence, but our economic independence. They made the 13 colonies the world's greatest free trade zone for the benefit of Americans. They protected it with a tariff wall. Alexander Hamilton had a bold project where through a combination of tariffs, infrastructure investments, and strategic investments in select industries, along with the creation of a national bank, to establish America as an independent manufacturing power. It actually wasn't until about the 1830s that the Southerners who wanted to preserve their system of slavery, which depended on slave labor and selling these resources like cotton and tobacco back to the mother country, that they started to rebel from this consensus of economic patriotism. And they began to really embrace the utopian idea of globalized free trade. And they colluded with our enemies, the British, to keep America in a subservient position. But then Abraham Lincoln and the Republican Party picked back up this playbook that was developed by Alexander Hamilton. And behind relatively high tariffs, along with infrastructure projects, they crushed the economic logic of the Confederacy, set us free from Great Britain, and we had unprecedented economic growth, 4% a year from the time of the Civil War all the way up to World War I. It was total domination by the Republican Party, and America became the world's greatest manufacturing power.
Amazing. I love the way you just laid that out so clearly and coherently. And there's actually a lot more in that article. I urge you all to check it out on American Compass. It's called Don't Trade on Me. John Burtka, great to see you. Thank you so much. We'll be back after this short break with a possible 2020